Hello again. This is the second part of the writing an assignment video with no writing frame. Now let's have a little recap of what we did in the first video. Remember, in the first video you had to write an assignment of 3,000 words and your topic was improving academic writing skills, so we decided to turn that into a question. Then you did a little bit of reading. You had some bullet point answers. One of them was you had to read a lot to improve your writing skill. And then we decided to turn this into a question and go and find some bullet point answers to this question. But you did some reading, you came up with some answers to this question as well. One of the bullet points was that you gain in-depth knowledge, and if you have in-depth knowledge, that helps your academic writing. So we turned that into a question as well. How can in-depth knowledge improve academic writing? And by this questioning technique, we broke down the whole assignment to the paragraph level. So basically, when you're addressing this question, how can in-depth knowledge improve academic writing, you are going to be at the paragraph level already. Now you did some reading about this question as well, different sources, you identified common themes, and you developed an argument that would answer this question. Gaining in-depth knowledge about the subject can help in presenting well-informed arguments, as well as decide what points should the writer focus on. So this is your main argument, and I think this is how far we got in the first video. And here in the second video, I will actually show you an example paragraph that I wrote about this subject. Right? So sorry, I forgot to mention that. So you have this main argument, and the rest of the paragraph will be the support for your main argument. Now, this is the example paragraph that I wrote. It's far from perfect, but I hope it will actually show you how you can think about writing a paragraph. So again, the first sentence will be the argument with which you are answering the question. Gaining in-depth knowledge about the subject can help in presenting well-informed arguments, as well as decide what points the writer should focus on, therefore improve academic writing. So now this argument answers all the questions that were asked before and definitely answers the main question. This way, with this technique, actually you can make sure that all your paragraphs are answering the main question and you stay on message, you don't go off topic. Now, so once we have the main argument, the rest of the paragraph supports it. What is my first support? This argument is supported by McDermott, who argues that successful academic writing at the undergraduate level largely depends on how widely the students read. Now, basically what I'm saying here is that I developed this argument because I read this research by McDermott, and in this research, she found that the students who read more actually get better results. Okay, but who's McDermott? She could be just a football player. So I need to say something more about this research. And here, in the second sentence, actually, I'm providing some more information about the research, but also some critique of the source. Although McDermott's sampling does not allow for generalization, she only interviewed lecturers in the School of Education at one UK university, her findings corroborate the findings of Rush and Neal. So now what we have here is that I have also provided some limitations of this study. You know, the sampling does not allow for generalization. There's nothing wrong with that, because there's plenty of studies. Actually, the majority of the studies will be done through with a sampling process that won't allow for generalization. That's not a problem, but you need to be honest about it and say that only because McDermott found this, it doesn't mean that it's true everywhere. But then there is a strength critique here as well, that her findings corroborate the findings of Rush and Neal. Okay, so you bring in two other studies that actually have the similar findings. Okay, and it's very important to note here that when I'm talking about critiquing a source, it doesn't mean that I'm criticizing the source. When you criticize something, you're only picking out the negatives. But when you critique, you can have a strength critique. So you talk about the good things, and you can have a deficiency critique. So you talk about the negative things, or you can talk about both. All right. But now that you mentioned these two other research, Roche and Neal, now you need to say something about those as well. So here's a little background information about them. While Roche interviewed lecturers in different schools at two different universities, Neal's survey covered schools of social sciences at several universities in the north of England, providing both qualitative and quantitative data on the question. Now, this is background information, so we know what the scope of the research was. We also know where they did the research and what kind of data they actually collected. So this is also a bit of an analysis of the research. And then I provide some further critique of this research, although neither Roche's nor Neal's study can be generalized because of the sampling methods, convenience and snowball sampling respectively. And in Neal's methodology, it is not stated whether the respondents only talked about undergraduate student writing. It is still fair to assume that lecturers tend to evaluate assignments more successful when their authors are well read in the field. Now, what's going on in this sentence is that, again, I provide some critique of the sources. By the way, it's not only the sampling and it's not only the methodology that you can critique. It's just, yeah, I just chose this one for whatever reason. I don't even know why, but that's important to note, that there are other things that you can critique a source on. But then there is this statement that it is still fair to assume that lecturers tend to value assignments more successful when their authors are varied in the field. So this is kind of the conclusion that even though there are some limitations to these, based on these three research projects or studies, it is still fair to assume that being well read is very important. And then there is a further justification for this. This assumption seems reasonable because of the strong corroboration of the findings of the researchers and the high percentage of respondents emphasizing extensive reading regardless of what school or university they worked at. So you are providing why it is still fair to assume this, because it doesn't matter that their context was somewhat different, not completely, but somewhat different, because McDermott talks about the School of Education. Roche was in several different schools, but only in two universities, and Neal only focuses on schools of social sciences. That is not that different, but it's somewhat different from the School of Education, but in several universities. So this so spreading out the data this way, we can still actually draw the conclusion that being well read is important for lecturers. Now, it's also important to note that this is not the only way that you could talk about something. I could have also included some numbers from some of the studies, like 95% of the respondents said this or that. And there are also other ways to provide support. So, for example, you could have brought in not research studies, but, for example, some theories, okay, that would support this argument. And maybe later on in another video, I will address that question, where I'm going to be looking at an example how you could use theories and not research studies to support your argument. But right now, this is what I chose to do. And basically, this is the basic idea of how to provide support for your argument. So you're not just listing the different things, but you're also critiquing the different sources, and you show the logic that you went through when you arrived at the conclusion that you arrived at. Okay? Now, once you've done that, you can go back to your list. You can check basically this topic. You can cross it off your list, and you can move on to the next topic, that is getting familiar with academic writing style. Is also a result of reading a lot of academic articles. Okay, and once you've gone through everything, then you can go back to the original list and decide, okay, I have addressed reading a lot in 4 different paragraphs based on different sources. Now I can move on and talk about improving language and vocabulary, and how that will help me improving my academic writing skills. So basically this is it. I hope you didn't find it very confusing. And, you know, whichever way you prefer to write an academic assignment, I highly encourage you still to book in for tutorials. All right. So thanks for watching this video, and bye.